Hi, everyone. It's Mary Ann. I'm a licensed insolvency trustee with Allen Marshall and Associates. If you don't know what a licensed insolvency trustee is, basically it's our new fancy name for trustee in bankruptcy, and it's been changed because we do way more than bankruptcy. So we're going to talk insolvency with my two colleagues, Matt Fader. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
And Francyne Myers. Hi. I had to pause because I keep calling her by her maiden name.
Don't be doing that now.
That's right. All right. So just give me 1 second here. I'm going to make sure I have the page up. Now it'll pop up here in a second. Okay, so I'm going to start with a few introductions. I already said who I am and what I do, but I'll just add that I'm also known as Dr. Debt because I am a huge financial literacy advocate, and you'll find me on social media sharing financial tips, tricks, and techniques to help you have happier, healthier finances. I've been doing a lot of interviews lately with different professionals on different topics, but I'm not the only one in the office. These are my trusted colleagues. This is who I turn to when I need to brainstorm ideas or help difficult situations, clients with difficult situations. And so I thought it would be great to bring them on the screen. So how about a little introduction? So Francyne, maybe tell us a little bit about how long you've been in the insolvency business. What made you decide to get into the business?
Well, Mary Ann, I have been in the insolvency business for 30 years this year, which is kind of interesting. May of 1991. I was just thinking about that when you asked me about that. I started first with what's called the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, which, as you know, is the government agency that gives us our licenses so that we can administer bankruptcies and consumer proposals. I worked for them for 23 years. Then I saw the light. 23, 22, something like that. I saw the light, decided that I wanted to go into private practice. Trustees were awesome people, and I can actually do a little bit more and help people out. So about 9 years ago, I left and got my trustee license, and here we are.
Awesome. And I love the stories about how people get into this industry, and I'll share mine in a moment as well. But how about you, Matt? Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you ended up here. Oh, and we can't hear you.
Myself. There we go.
There we go.
I'm used to muting and unmuting in this virtual world. So my name is Matt Fader. I got into the insolvency industry in 2005. I got my trustee's license in 2019. So just over 2 years now that I've had my license. Prior to that, I was doing marketing work at Casino Nova Scotia, where and I guess how did I find my way into insolvency? Well, I got fired from my job in marketing, and I went to a temp agency that I worked for when I was in school and said I've never been fired. I've never been on EI before. I'm not in any rush. Find me a job. And they said, well, we can put you in this place that does hedge funds or this place that is trustee in bankruptcy. And I said, well, I don't know anything about hedges other than you trim them, and I don't know anything about bankruptcy except you go it. So I picked the bankruptcy route, and however many years later now.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think we kind of happened into this industry in a lot of instances, and that's what I hear. And I know it was the same for me. I applied for an insolvency receptionist position back in 1988, and I didn't know what insolvency meant, so I looked it up in the dictionary, and I thought that doesn't sound very fun because basically it means you have no money and you can't pay your bills. And but I applied and I got the job, and I just kind of worked my way, up through the ranks, and eventually got my trustee's license the last few years. I left the industry for a while and I came back, and when I came back, I thought if I'm coming back, I'm going to go all the way, and I did. And it was quite the journey. I don't know, we'll talk about that whole process during this session, but it might be something at some point to share. So what do you love most about what you do? That's one of the questions that I've written down, because I do find that in this industry, you really do come to enjoy your job, if not love it, and for different reasons. By the way, I just want to say, anyone popping on this live, and Brenda Wood, I see you. Hello. So I just want to say hi. And if anybody's here and they do have a question, just post it in, or if you just want to say hi, post it in. And we're also here to answer questions, but we're just having a little chit chat, kind of informally today. And I'm just hanging out with my colleagues because it's fun. So, Francyne, what do you love most about what you do?
I think what I love most about, first of all, I love dealing with people. I love talking to people, and I love listening to people's stories. That's one thing I've always loved to do, right? I'm always very interested in people. Now, what I can do is not only listen to people's stories, but I can also help them with any kind of financial situation. I actually have the license where I can give them a little bit of advice. We can get them going, and we get a new, fresh financial start. So it's not only being able to talk to people, it's being able to find a solution for people, and then hearing the relief in their voice once we find a path forward when they thought there wasn't a path forward. So it's extremely, extremely rewarding that way, Marianne.
Yeah, I would have to ditto all that. How about you, Matt?
I think that anybody that works in this industry, especially in the personal bankruptcy side, is going to say kind of the same thing, that you can sit across the table from a complete stranger, have them dump all their issues out in front of you, and see that they are at a point of complete hopelessness and despair, and then have them walking out saying, oh my, when I walked in here, I thought my life was over, and now I have options, and there is a solution that we can help them out with. So it can be very, very rewarding when you can take somebody in that position and help them out.
Yeah, I agree. And people say, is this, that must be a depressing job. And, again, when I applied originally and looked up the definition, and I thought that, and it really is anything but. I mean, that's, to me, it's a favorite part as well, is that, people come in, they're very distraught. They don't know what to do. They don't know what their options are, and quite honestly, when someone walks out the door and says, I feel lighter than when I came in, or I'm so glad I made this call, or I'm so glad I talked to you, like that just means the world to me. Yeah. So I think we all answered the same answer in a slightly different way. So I thought it might be fun to share some stories now, not about people, of course, but we run into some very interesting situations in this line of work. And so what's your favorite story about someone you've helped? And obviously you're not going to share any names, but just in general, just a general overview. So I'm going to mix things up, and I'm going to say, Matt, you tell us your favorite story about someone you've helped.
Well, when you think about, the amount of people that you've sort of walked through the door and assisted through getting that fresh start, they do all sort of blend together. But I know that one of the big things for me was, I remember, because where we have to do the financial counseling, that is a requirement for anybody doing a personal bankruptcy or a proposal. One of the things that we talk about, of course, is financial planning and budgeting and goal setting and things of that nature. And I remember having a conversation with, she was a single mom, had 2 kids. We were talking about goals, and she said, well, I want to take my youngest to, and well, I suppose the other kid too, but she really wanted to make sure that her youngest kid got to go to Disneyland. I was like, okay, well, that's a big goal. That's probably, probably seems very unattainable for you right now. She said, well, yeah, and I said, well, let's talk about it. And we worked out a plan. We set a time frame for her. We set, we researched out a cost together, and we really just were able to set that goal for her and put her on a path that we had her plan to get there in 4 years. And she called me up about a year after she was discharged, so around year 3, and said, my plan is still on track, but I've already saved all the money to be able to do it.
Wow.
So for that, like, wow, somebody actually listened to the advice that I give them. And not only that, but they were able to take that to build on, to educate their kids about some budgeting, money management, seeing the value of setting goals and how attainable they can be, and really to achieve something that hopefully her kid will remember forever. And I know her mom was very grateful for. So that was a nice story.
That's pretty awesome. And especially when someone's so desolate that they think, well, they're never going to be able to do anything. And we know how guilty we feel, not being able to give our kids what we think we're supposed to give them. And so that's a pretty awesome story. I'll jump in next just to mix things up. By the way, if any of our insolvency colleagues are watching this and you have a favorite story you want to share, post it in the comments and we'll share that for you as well. So many stories. And, I was planning this talk and I'm thinking I should probably have answers to my own questions. And there's just so many, but probably the one most recently that really kind of just stands out. When the gentleman came to see me, he was living in his vehicle with his dog. And that's not the first person that's come to see me that's been living in their vehicle. And he had a girlfriend. And, I said, well, how come you're not living with your girlfriend? And he said, I can't bring that baggage to her. And he was, such an honorable man and an admirable man. And he wanted to pay his debts. And he was just, very distraught and didn't have any income coming in and was waiting for, I think, disability. And within, I think it was 2 months, it was about 2 months, and he moved in with his girlfriend because we helped him get his finances on track. So he felt like he had more control and he wasn't bringing this baggage to the relationship, and got a job. And he and his puppy dog were living with his girlfriend, which was such a happy story. So I was so thrilled when he came in for his counseling session and shared that. And there's just so many stories like that. Love to hear yours, Fran.
I think my favorite is, there's not a specific one like Matt, and that's a great story, Matt. I love that story, by the way. I think what I like is to see people, rather than feel downtrodden by money and finances and a source of stress, is after we relieve the burden, right, and get them going with a fresh start, I see them now excited about setting goals and moving ahead. And I think that's what I like the most, is seeing people excited about their future and working towards their goals, like Matt, like your example with the lady who was taking her child to Disney, right? They're looking at getting, a vehicle that doesn't break down all the time. They can finally start saving for that house. They could start rehabilitating their credit score, free of the past debts. And it's just the excitement you see about the future, when before the future just really didn't have a lot of hope, right? But now they have that hope and that bright future. And I love that.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, completely. So one of the questions that I had written down was funniest story, but then I started thinking about this and I wasn't entirely sure I could come up with a funniest story. And the only one I could come up with, which really has nothing to do with the client, well, it sort of does indirectly, and I'll just share it, but it's a funny story about myself, was I was quite new in the industry and, still quite a bit younger. And I had popped out of the office to the washroom, and I came back and I was talking to the receptionist, and my client was sitting behind me. We had a nice little chat. The person behind me said, "Miss, your skirt is caught up in your waistband." So I was completely mortified. I didn't know it was my client. And I went in and sat in the office. They said, "Your client's here." And I had to go out and get the person and bring it in. Was the only funny story I could think of. It kind of has to do with the client. Hey, you should share stories about yourself. So, Matt, any funny story you can think of?
Well, I got all kinds of funny stories, but I mean, I don't know how many would be appropriate for this podcast.
Do you have any clean, professional, funny stories? Although mine was borderline.
Yeah, well, yours is borderline, and I can tell a bunch of them about people going to the bathroom too, right? Especially in this virtual world, because people forget to mute their microphones sometimes.
It's true.
That happened on a signing that I was doing about a month and a half ago. I don't know what that noise is, and I don't really want to ask, but yeah. So It was unpleasant.
Okay, maybe that was a can of worms question.
Yeah, I think so. Because I can know a lot of them, but without, I don't want to
Yeah,
get.
and I can't, Fran, I can't really think of a funny incident
Well,
with a
you
client
know
per
what?
se.
I think there have been a couple of funny things that have happened since we've gone virtually, right? Because we're doing video signings, and we've kind of chuckled a little over them, like the bankrupts that you're not sure how much clothes they have
What
on.
they have on, yeah.
Yeah, like
When you
like
video sign, they kind of
stories.
look like they don't have anything. And luckily mine was just a gentleman, but I was hoping that that's all we went was that far down. But there have been a few little funny stories from our virtual signings because people are much more at ease. They're usually at home or in their, well, maybe not in their public, in their car, but they're usually at home. So you get some funny stories about, all of a sudden you hear them yelling at the person at the door, or, the kid comes screaming in, or, all things like that are happening virtually, or, I think it makes us more human, right?
Yes. And I guess I kind of put that question in to lighten things up a little bit before my next question, which is the saddest story. So that may, it's kind of related to one I said before, but those we see a lot of. And so how about that one, Fran? What would you share?
There was only, most people, like I say, it's, and I've been through a divorce, and, so, I know they're never fun, right? These kind of things. But I think I went from sad to kind of tragic. This was the one, and usually I can, because I'm helping people, I can kind of, I'm okay, after talking to people all day and listening to their sad stories, I'm okay because we find them a solution. The one gentleman that, like I said, I went home and I cried all evening, was the gentleman who, he had financial situation, of course, but he had been a bit of an older gentleman, maybe middle-aged, and he'd never married. And then he'd found the girl of his dreams, and they were very happy. And then a few years into a relationship, she had, and I don't know what it was, I can't remember the details, but he found her dead. She'd passed away from some heart attack or a stroke or something. And then everything kind of went to, wearing a handbasket after that. And he eventually started coming to me. Well, I got to tell you, he was just such a lovable little guy. That's all I could say about him. And as I was talking to him, I could feel the tears welling up my eyes. And, I'm a professional, right? I had to kind of blink back the tears. But I went home that night and I just cried because I just couldn't. It was just so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. And I'm a sympathy crier. So when people are in with tears, it's hard for me. It's hard not to sometimes. Yeah. See, I told you I was lightening up before this.
But that makes us good at our job too, I think, Marianne, because all of us are very empathetic.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. You want to chime in on a saddest story, Matt? Don't make us cry.
Don't make us cry.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, unfortunately. You get to meet people from so many different walks of life, so many different age groups. And like you, Francyne, you hear it, you certainly empathize, but it is very rare that I take a story home with me. I remember about a year and a half ago, just trying to get through an interview with a guy, and he was like 34 years old with 3 kids, just recently separated, just diagnosed with like stage 4 cancer, and like, you're like, you just listening to this guy and you're like, like my cold black heart is breaking, for this guy on the other end of the line, just because it's like, what a terrible hand that you've been dealt, and who's going to look after these kids, and all the other stuff that's coming down the pipe for him, and sadly we never got past the interview stage, so I don't even know what happened to him, because he was very sick, very young, and it just tragic, right? So and it sucks. You go home and that is the kind of stuff that those are the scars you do carry, right?
Yeah, and sometimes all you can do is just be there and be an ear for someone. I mean, and we're going to talk in a minute about, what happens if we can't help someone in a few minutes. But, I know for me it's, a lot of times it's running into people who just simply don't have enough money to survive, and that happens a lot, and we see it a lot in seniors and people with disabilities. And, most recently, there's a gentleman, he's a client now. And he just simply doesn't have enough money. I mean, there's no way around it, and he has lots of medical issues, and he cries often when I talk to him because I'm kind to him, and he says he doesn't get that a lot, and he just wants a hug. Like he's just kind of lacking in that compassion and being given compassion. And so those postcards they sent out, and they give a hug. Do you remember was it the province that sent those out last month or the month before? They sent postcards and they asked you to send it to someone. Don't remember that?
No, gee, they never sent me one.
I think they got missed for a lot of people. I got one,
but I don't remember getting one.
So I had it setting aside, and I forgot all about it, and I just came across it on the weekend, and I filled it out and sent it to him and said, "Here's a virtual hug," just because. Yeah, it was a neat initiative that they did, and I wondered how many people actually took the postcards and did something with them.
Oh, maybe it was just HRM. I didn't get one.
No, maybe. I see a kitty tail. So, so are there instances where you can't help someone? And if so, what do you do, Francyne?
Well, they're few and far between, which is good. But yeah, there are instances where we can't help people. Sometimes people may have, let's say, a lot of what we call equity built up on their house, meaning that the value of the house and the amount of the mortgage is, fairly low comparatively speaking. We see that a lot in seniors, actually, where it's all, and they don't obviously want to leave their house. I wouldn't either, right? And where they may owe debt. So it's very hard to help someone which, like I say, they're asset rich. They can't get the money. It's not like your house is made of cash, right? The money's there, but you can't get at it, right?
Yeah.
So those are really hard situations. I mean, as much as we can, we try and work deals with the creditors or give them tips or even try to work out a plan with them on how to deal with the debt. Same thing if somebody maybe doesn't have that much debt that we say, gee, you know what, a bankruptcy, you could probably do this by if we work out a plan with you and get the debt eliminated even within a year or two. Where we just don't feel a bankruptcy would be warranted in that situation. Most people we do help, but the people we can't help or we can't do something for, we help them regardless, or I will refer them to someone who I think can help them. I never let somebody go without helping them in some way.
Yeah, I would pretty much echo that completely. Yeah. I was thinking about this, and there's really two main instances where I find that there's not much we can do. One is if someone really doesn't have either a lot of debt or they're judgment proof. And for anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, it just means the creditors can't really do much. You're not working. There's no income to garnish you. You have no assets. There's really little to nothing they can do. And or they're not quite there, like they don't need bankruptcy, and maybe not even a proposal, maybe it's just budgeting advice. And so in those instances, I'm the same. I just, I give as much advice and information as I can. I had a gal last week, and really she has no idea how to budget, was never taught. She said, I need to know. And I said, well, we don't do that specifically, but there's some resource forms on our website. I'll send you copies of them, and you draft it all up. And if you need somebody just to look at it and give you some advice, let me know. We can do that. So sometimes it's just that. And then the other one is where they need something other than what we do. And so, I'm a huge advocate for having. I don't like to leave anything on the table. You come to see me and I can't help you and you need something else, I want to be able to connect you with someone else or somewhere else. So that's really important to me. And so I'm always building my network so that I have people, right now I have 2 or 3 really good car financing places, several mortgage brokers. I always send people back to talk to their banks, but I say, don't sign on the dotted line. Just go talk to them and see what they'll say, and then reach back out and we'll look at it and see if this is a solution for you or if you need to do something else. So, that's pretty important to me. How about you, Matt? Any other instances outside of what we talked about where you can't really help? And
I mean, not really. It always boils down to that same issue of saying, somebody, it's like, well, I understand things are tough, you're overextended or whatever, but sometimes the debt load actually is manageable. Sometimes, as you said, they have no clue on doing their budget. And people that are just like really just looking for advice on how to rebuild their credit. And I think that one of the things that I always, like you, Marianne, it's like, and like we're all supposed to do because we are licensed, and part of our job is to ensure that a debtor is informed as to all their options, not just the two that I can help you out with, but all the self-help remedies and the other things that are out there. And that is something that sets us apart as being licensed insolvency trustees versus some of the other debt assistance types of peoples out there that aren't LITs like us, is that we are required to say, hey, my job is ultimately to talk you out of using my service, because a bankruptcy is very much a last resort. A proposal is very much a last resort. So when we get those people that are calling and they're not quite there yet, like you, Marianne, it's like, okay, you're not here. You don't need my services, but here's how we develop that plan that you can get the relief that you need without needing to sign anything with me. I mean, that is sometimes what I think does set us apart, because there's other people out there that would just say, come on in and sign some papers. I know we, as the three of us, are going to investigate all options for all people before we say, well, these are the areas you can go down, and this is kind of the route that looks like it makes the most sense for you. So it happens quite frequently, and I have no issues at all with saying, go refinance, go do this.
Absolutely.
Do that. I got a lot of people paying me. I don't need your money that bad, so go out and solve your problem if it's solvable without needing me.
Yeah, it's an interesting industry that way, because I remember looking at stats years ago. I was with a different firm, but I mean, it's all relevant to all the different firms. And I remember looking at the stats, and it was something like 40% of people who walk through our door never go through one of our services being bankruptcies or proposals. And we prided ourselves on it, right? And we do that here because we were able to send them in another direction and help them avoid bankruptcy or, even a debt settlement in some cases. So it's an odd industry that way, that, if we can help someone avoid coming to see us, it's a bit of a celebratory, moment. You don't really see that in business too often. But people appreciate that, right? And it builds their confidence and trust in us. Yeah. So what advice would you have for someone wanting to get into this business?
I'll go first on that. I think that somebody going into business might want to, if the trustee has time, is maybe just touch base with the trustee, first of all, and just kind of maybe chat to them a little bit about the industry. The other thing I suggest, we, as we all know, we go through quite a rigorous training program to get our licenses in this industry. And the first step is to contact the Canadian Association of Insolvency and Restructuring Professionals. That's quite a mouthful, so CAIRP for short, right? They are the organization which administers the first part of the educational component that we trustees have to adhere to and go through. It usually takes a minimum of 2 years. Very often it can take maybe a few more years than that, depending on your pace and your lifestyle and what have you. And the first course is actually a rolling enrollment, where it's you can go through and do the course, and then it's a multiple choice exam, I believe, and that will give you an idea of whether this is an industry that you would enjoy going into. That would be always my first advice. When people, after they speak with me, say, wow, this sounds really interesting, I said, well, then take that first course and see if it is something before you jump in with your feet first. Because even though I think we make it look real easy, I honestly do, right? We've gone through a very rigorous, it's like a graduate study program. It's a professional degree. All right. It's a tough course to study, and there's very, very rigorous examination. So you have to certainly be dedicated and want to go through this. You're not going to get this. It's not a quick certificate. It's quite the educational component.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with that. And it is kind of this gradual thing that we tend to, metamorph into, sort of.
Yeah.
And I would just kind of add, I guess, on the emotional element of that, I would add, you've got to genuinely really care about people and really want to help them. I mean, I think that's what makes you good at what you do in this industry. And, we only have to look around at our colleagues, here on the screen and in the office that aren't on the screen, and our colleagues in the industry. I mean, we just, we're all empathetic people, and we bring that definitely to the profession. Anything you want to add on that, Matt?
Not really. I mean, the best way and the thing that people do need to appreciate is that, and I can speak for myself and speak for Marianne, is that, we stumbled into the industry. We started at the bottom, and it took years and years and years to build to the top. I've worked in many firms where, we'll have a new hire and they're just raring to go. Get me that license. It can't be that difficult, right? And you're like, well, this guy right here is not the easiest read, right? You got to know this guy pretty friggin' well to get to what it does, right? It should create a small earthquake. But yeah, you need to know that you have to be willing to learn. And one of the things that I'm passionate about, of course, is teaching. So I'll have a lot of people that say, well, I want to learn more about the industry, and I'm like, okay, well, what does the act say then? If you really want to know, you got a question for me. Where is it at in the act? And that's usually my first test to find out if somebody's gotten through the door, if they've been lucky enough. And I say lucky because if you can get a job in an insolvency firm, you are lucky. You are going to learn a very, very specialized set of skills. They're not really transferable outside of the insolvency industry, but when you have them, you have a complete flexibility to work pretty much across the country, because we all play from the same rule book, regardless of where provincial legislation set aside. But, there's a great opportunity if you can get your foot in the door. But if you get your foot in the door and you're serious about saying, I would like to do this, then you got to have the motivation, you got to have the drive to do the work, to get to know that book well. And you have to have the personality, you have to, it's as much a sales job as it is a knowledge job. You have to be able to relate to people, and you have to be empathetic. If you're a cold fish, you're probably not going to get too far in the PB world.
You got to come in for the right reasons, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Come in for the right reasons and stay because it's interesting. Never boring.
Don't come in just for the paycheck, because it's okay.
Definitely. So we're just about to the end of our time, and this has been great. I really love this slightly different version of the interviews I do, because I get to hang out with my colleagues. So how about we do we go out with a little bit of a myth busting. I know I'm just kind of throwing this at you last minute, but there's lots of myths in the insolvency world, so around bankruptcies and proposals, and maybe we can just end with one of them. So I'm just going to let whoever wants to go first, seeing how I just threw that at you, and you now have to think off the cuff of one of the myths, which I'm sure isn't that hard.
Oh, geez, there's lots of them. When you do a bankruptcy, you don't automatically lose your house. I hear that a lot. People call me up, I'm going to lose my house. I also hear, if I go bankrupt, I won't be able to travel because you're going to seize my passport. I've heard that too, which I think is kind of interesting. So all sorts of myths, right?
Yeah. Matt?
I mean, it's all going to be 9 months, and I'm only going to pay next to nothing as far as a bankruptcy is concerned, or I'll never have credit again.
Right.
I mean, that's always a big one. I hear people, they say, well, I don't want to file because I'll never have a credit card again. It's like, well, but if it was that hard to rebuild credit, I wouldn't have third, fourth, and fifth timers, but I do. So Don't worry so much about your credit. It's the least your concerns right now. Your life is a disaster. Let's fix that first. So there's a lot of that stuff that's out there. For anybody that has questions, just call a trustee. It's free to call. We'll take the time to give you the answers. Don't say, well, my next door neighbor told me this. If your next door neighbor's a trustee, believe them. If they're a refrigerator repair person, I don't know if I'd be taking their advice.
Well, and every situation is different, and we hear
That's
that
right.
a lot. But my friend paid this, or my sister did that, or my brother did this, and every situation's different, and it really needs to be looked at. I think a big one for me is if I file a consumer proposal, it will be better on my credit rating. And you guys know how passionate I am about credit scores and credit ratings, and how messed up that system is, and how misunderstood it is. And so when people do file consumer proposals, and then years later they're going, I wish I'd done a bankruptcy because it took me longer to reestablish credit. I think the important thing is that people know going in exactly what the pros and cons are, and the benefits and disadvantages. And really that's our role, is just to lay out, like Matt said, we're going to give you all the options. So here's all your different options. Here's the pros, here's the cons, here's the cost. What questions do you have? Here's the information. You now have enough information that you can make the decision that's best for you. When you make the decision, we're going to help guide you through it, or we're going to connect you to who you need to, get through this as unscathed as possible and get back on your feet as quickly as possible. Right? Okay. Right. Well, I think it's time for us to get back to work and go help some of those people that need our help. So thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun. And for anybody watching the live, hi. See a few faces or names that I recognize. I see faces, but they're yours and you're here. And anyone on the replay, if you have a question, just post it in comments, and we'll get notice of that. And hey, if you need any financial advice, we are a few keystrokes away or phone call away. We are here to help, not to judge.
And we service all the Maritime provinces as well. Right?
Yes. Thank you. I'm hoping that maybe we can get our New Brunswick and PEI trustees maybe on one of these calls. So I'll work on that for one of the next ones. All right. So just a heads up there, New Brunswick and PEI colleagues, we're coming after you next.
I can do your files if you're in New Brunswick. Just call me.
That's right. Call Matt.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the office.
See you, Marianne.
Bye.